All right. Don't leave now. Come back. Hi, everyone. So what we're going to talk about is some tech stuff. So brace yourself. But we're going to talk about cookie deprecation and what Apple is doing in layman's terms, and in a way that you could explain to your kids, and hopefully they would understand, at least the second part. So let's jump right into it. So if you will, get your phones out. That's something you don't want people to do normally when you're on stage. And take a picture of this, or you can run through these steps. But just because we're kind of pressed for time, I'll sort of run you through it quicker. If you run through those steps, what you will see is the image on the left is my phone's location history being tracked by Apple, everything I've done, when I arrived, how long I stayed. Pull that out at Thanksgiving dinner and freak out your family and friends, and it's fun, the previous slide. So on the right is what it's like after iOS 15. They make it a little harder to see that, but here's what's important about that. You can use that data to tell a wonderful story about where visitors have been, where they've come, how long they stayed, what did they do in the destination. You can then upload that data to, say, Facebook and retarget people. Very powerful information, right? But what Apple has done is on the right side of the screen is back in April, they basically said no more tracking or retargeting of users based on device ID. Can't use our device ID to find users, and Facebook is livid about that. On the left, I'm about to explain, this is kind of the graphic that Apple gives to explain it. It's simple, right? Actually, a little complicated. So we'll use an analogy to make it a little more simple, all right? So everyone here familiar with a mail order catalog? Yes? Raise your hand. No? Okay, good. I'm not the only one. All right. So you order some things. You have to give them your location. You obviously have to tell them what you want. Why? So they can send it back to your location. The problem with this is your private purchases can now be linked to your personal identity and your location. Okay, so the thing on the far left, Poopery, hilarious product. You should watch the commercial. It's very funny when you have some time. Great marketing. But that now is linked to you as a person. Things you do at 2 a.m. on the phone, things you're Google searching, right? It's linked to your location and your history. Similarly, on the web, your IP address, that's your return to sender address. That's how the web knows where to send the website that you're dialing up on your phone. Send it back to this location, okay? Right? But because of that, your private behaviors on the web can now be linked to your location and your personal identity. So what does Apple do about this? No more of that. Now they'll do this. They'll encrypt the website that you're using on your device so that they don't know. They hide it from themselves. They also hide the IP address and your personal location and identity from the websites you're visiting. How do they do this? There's a big loop. They have a trusted third party. There's actually two. Rumor has it it's probably Cloudflare, but that's just a rumor. But they send all this stuff in a way that does what? It disconnects your location from your identity. Okay, so let's just think real quick about how Apple works. This is how they think about location. You got 2 meters or 2 miles. You also have kind of how location is tracked. So as you go into a Starbucks and you scroll on you're on their Wi-Fi and you scroll the web, the signals from those ads can be used to help kind of triangulate and guess about your location. And the vast majority of location data is this kind of information. So you can then pinpoint where people are going. You went to the Starbucks, and then they went to the Yankee Stadium and jumped on the Wi-Fi there, and then they went to this Broadway show, and we have our visitor. What is Apple's change going to do to this? They want to obfuscate user location to the city or even country/zip or time zone level. So in other words, you won't know where that user actually is. Did they go to your hotel? Who knows? Can you retarget them? Certainly not. Can you get back engaged with it? Can you ask questions of the data in the way that you used to? Nope. So this is kind of what you can't do. Here's one other thing. Is consented location data the solution? Now, how many of you have seen this graphic on the whatever side that is for you? Yes? And how many of you always hit allow? Exactly, right? Between 5 and 15%, according to AppsFlyer, are actually opting in. And if you're like me, that's probably by accident. Why? Because I don't need Sudoku to know my location, to track me, but that's the vast majority of location data that we're getting. It's not from your weatherchannel.com. Those guys have enough money to not sell it off to other people. So, and there's battery life implications and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna move faster. If you wanna find out for yourself, snapshot of that. Here are some questions you can ask of your data and your providers. And just to know that I'm not making this up, these are screenshots from me after I updated to iOS 15. So that's the screen. This is use country and time zone location. And this is all the great, sorry, it was nighttime, all the great graphics they're giving to regular users all the time that explain privacy to them, to make it accessible to my mom and dad, right? Who don't care anything about this. But now they're like, you want to track my mail? You want to do what? Nope, can't do it, right? So, and these are more graphics. And then also it costs a lot of money to, it costs Facebook and those guys a lot of money, right? This decision. Okay, let's shift gears. So, cookies. What is a cookie? Or first, why? Why is this happening? Well, partly because of legislative issues, what do you call it? Social dilemma and it becoming more mainstream. That pop-up we mentioned, and then that guy on the far end of the screen. What is a cookie? It's a tracking ID for data collection, activation, measurement, and reporting and insights. Okay, similar kind of problem. What does that really mean to my kids? It's like rhino tagging. How many of you are familiar with this kind of process or image? Okay, you watch Discovery Channel, they're in a helicopter and they say, oh, there he is, and they shoot a dart and it tracks, and there's a beacon that tracks formerly private behaviors to let you know what those rhinos are doing. So you can track where they eat, their mating habits, life stages, and even re-engage them later. They fly back on a helicopter and say, oh, you've grown so much, right? You have a family now. Similarly, your device is the rhino, only your tracking history is your browsing, your shopping, your travel history, and then to be re-engaged at a later point. Think of it like a giant spreadsheet that's capturing all your information without your consent or permission so that you can be engaged across these channels, so that you can be retargeted by this sort of stuff. You see the ad, it pops up on Facebook, you buy it, hopefully they stop or they waste your impressions. Okay, what's Google doing? What's their thing? Okay, shift our analogy just a little bit. Imagine a giant projector screen, okay? That's Google Chrome. Your website is the projection. What cookies are today, you know, your rhino tagging thing, the dart is a thumbtack. It can go in the screen easily. You know what Google's doing? They're turning their screen into an iron wall. They're saying on Chrome, which is like 60+% of the web, cookies won't fire, gun gets jammed, so no rhino, no retargeting, no activation, not as easily at least, right? And this is not just us, this is in the news, this is a big deal. 10 billion in Apple's case, I'm pretty sure a lot of money for Google and not for others, perhaps in other people's cases. Again, can't do similar things that we showed on the earlier screen. Also this stuff, personalization, enrichment, scoring, signals, you have verification of identities, very difficult to do without that free data. Okay, so this is one of the kinds of solutions. You'll notice that the screen still exists. In Adara's case, this is our solution. We have an SDK, we have identity graphs, we have identity resolution tech, and all this stuff. We put it on our partner sites. So here's 3 things you can do to kind of get ready for this. 1, use consented purchase data. Big thing about this. You can't turn off your card swipes. The accuracy is impeccable, totally deterministic, and the coverage is out of this world. So like our data, it covers about 40% of US spending. That's about 2.7 trillion, 40 million households. You name it, and then we have a thing like this, but this isn't a sales pitch. All right, and then you can use consented travel data. So again, if you have partnerships with big travel brands, you can sync those databases, and then you can link those identities across the world, have massive scale, onboard lots of different data points, and basically you know that I flew here on American, and I like to stay at Marriott, and that I'm planning and searching for a trip through Kayak elsewhere if you have this kind of information, right? And the third thing though, this is what is big, and this is the important thing. You can build your own data hub. Yeah, it's like, what is that? You can onboard your own data. So you see what's happening is Apple is increasing the size of their walled garden. Great companies are walled gardens. Google's a walled garden, or increasingly with cookies going away. Adara is a walled garden. We have our own data. We have data rights management. You can't just access it without permission. Expedia, TripAdvisor, all these great companies are walled gardens. You could be a walled garden yourself. And your data is way more valuable than you know. What you need, though, is a bit of context. And so you can enrich that data with other people's data. So collectively, if everybody has their own and co-ops it out, basically takes Adara's model with all those logos, and you start doing that with other businesses in a privacy compliant way, you win. you become collectively bigger and more nuanced than all the other data providers. And this is just the beginning of what you could do. So here's something that we did. This is just our solution, right? And I'm going to explain it in a simple term. Again, I want my kids to understand, my dad. So a little bit of a quiz. If you had to password, alphabet only, one character, how many guesses would a hacker need to guess your password? Math geniuses, come on, shout it out. 26, there we go. So you are obligated now to answer the next question. All right, 2 characters, alphabet only. What's the math at least? You don't have to do the calculation. Ooh, someone, who is that? I heard it, oh, awesome, 26 squared. Okay, so all I'm trying to do is relate. This is a increasingly harder thing to guess, okay? What we did is we tokenized all data. It's an alphanumeric 64-bit string. Every bit of PII is this, right, in our system. It's also something called zero-party data. Data never leaves the firewall. So your PII, your data, your customer data stays with you. We tokenize it, and what it means out on the web is something different. We also didn't bank on something like hashed emails or one unique identifier. Everything is an identifier, and depending on how much you have on that user, it's either a probabilistic match, which is a certain level of certainty, or a deterministic match, which is if you have first name, home zip code, and maybe like IP, boom, you got that person pretty well, right? So the other thing we do for privacy, because we have a major privacy focus, is we do salting. So how many of you have had to change your email address, every 6 months at work or something like that? Show of hands. Yep, okay, some know the struggle. What do? You add an exclamation point at the end of it, right? Yeah, because that's easy. You just did salting so that you create a completely different hash out of that thing, right? So we do salting for all of our partners so that United and American don't have the same data on Zeek just because Zeek has information in both. And so that allows some protection against hackers. All right, so get this spreadsheet example, no more of that. Take your password example, plop it into the spreadsheet for activation, and you're good to go, right? Privacy compliant, consent-based. Okay, so review. Build your own data hub. This is what Adara is. This is what you could be. Onboard your own data. You say, what data do we have? I don't have a login. It doesn't matter. If you have a website and people are going there, that's your data. The only thing is, you don't know certain things about those people, right? And so you can take that password thing and you pump all your data in, we tokenize it, we link them across an identity graph, we can score it and enrich it, and now you're taking this Venn diagram and basically helping yourself in that way. Now you don't have to work with Adara to do this, but we have travel data that could help enrich what you're doing, and we're also very focused on activations across travel, which is different. There's others like Adobe and Axiom, so forth and so on. So you can do this, have that, we're almost done. Soft metrics are now enlightened by hard metrics. You now see this, then you see that. You can do scoring. So during the pandemic, all of us were searching for travel, we're dreaming, but who were those people who had the booking history to then actually make that decision? The people who were elite or who spent more, traveled more, stayed longer. You can answer questions, and that's the end of the presentation. All right, you guys can go to lunch. Thank you so much.